Speaker. Now, yesterday, the COVID inquiry heard from Sir Patrick Vallance, we've been talking about it all morning. He claimed that Rishi Sunak thought the government should just let people die. This is what apparently was claimed by Dominic Cummings. It's all hearsay and tittle-tattle. This as arguments raged over whether or not there should be a second lockdown in the autumn of 2020. Well, right now, today, Chris Whitty, the government's most senior medical advisor in the pandemic, is currently giving his evidence. Well, joining me now is Molly Kingsley. She's co-founder of the campaign group Ask for Them and also co-author of the brand new book, The Accountability Deficit. Good afternoon to you, Molly.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Molly, evidence yesterday was as frustrating, I think, as the evidence has been so far from all of the people who've been participating. KC's, the barristers, in this very courtroom-style format, just asking questions about tittle-tattle and who said what. And did you use this nasty word about someone in your memoirs, in your daily diary? And never really getting to the bottom of the key questions is, how did you make these decisions? On what data and what evidence did you make them? And why did you make them, on that basis? I don't think we've had any of those questions asked or answered.
No, I mean, the core questions here should be, did the very uncertain, in some cases, benefit of these interventions, including lockdowns, exceed the known and, in many cases, very certain harm? And I don't think we're any closer to answering that question than we were however many months ago it was that the inquiry started. In fact, in many ways, I think we're further away because, as a few of us have picked up, the inquiry seems to have let's call it its preferred storyline, which is that actually the reason lockdowns didn't work as well as maybe they could have done was because we didn't do them sooner and harder and faster.
And longer. Don't forget longer. Disaster. That was the Labour policy. Longer, and indeed the policy of the BBC, Sky News, ITV and everybody. Why? If we don't, we just save more lives. What I find extraordinary, we were playing a little clip earlier. We're going to play some clips of Chris Whitty, what he's had to say today, but we played some clips earlier in the show, Patrick Vallance. And where he was asked, he was just asked some sort of questions about, like, say, the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. And asked whether it was likely that scheme would have been likely to affect the rate of COVID transmission. He said, undoubtedly that would have, people being basically paid subsidy to go and eat out, that would absolutely have done so. But no one pointed out, you'd think the KC asking the question might have wanted to know. You'd think maybe Sir Patrick Vallance, as a former chief scientific advisor, would have known this, that actually there was no increase at all in cases or hospital admissions in August 2020. There was a later spike in late September. This, of course, after schools had gone back, and indeed we had colder weather. That spike happened across pretty much most of Western Europe, which is weird because they didn't have the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. And one of the places where it was really being used was in Cornwall, which saw 11 million visitors in August 2020, did not only not see a spike in transmissions, it saw a fall in transmission. And yet, this stuff, which is objective, hard data, official data, not what I think, official data, not even mentioned. But we're having a little bit of a mention about what Patrick Vallance wrote down that Dominic Cummings had said to him about Rishi Sunak saying to him about wanting everyone to die. It's mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing. And I think, there is, maybe it's a boring legal point, but there is a legal point here about how some of this evidence, in inverted commas, is being allowed in. And it's so selective. I think, obviously, I look at it in part through the lens of children and how children fared. And we know the answer to that was very badly in the main. And the other quite incredible disclosure yesterday was about the rule of six. So this was the rule that, children in England weren't excluded from. And we knew at the time there was no good scientific basis for that. And in fact, that was confirmed yesterday. And, it was glossed over by the inquiry. And this was really quite a major point that I think did children a real disservice for the best part of an entire year. And the inquiry didn't pick up on it.
Yeah. No, exactly. And we know even the evidence for masks in classrooms. No evidence, even when the Department for Education was forced to publish the evidence. I still find this, I remember the time just being so, I couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry or just punch a wall, where the evidence they showed was a study which actually showed that masks in no way dealt with slow transmission. And that was their evidence for making kids wear masks for 8 hours a day in the classroom. I as I will keep saying, never forgive, never forget. Some of these people should be in jail for what they did. They really should, not in an inquiry. But let's have a little watch and listen of some very short clips of what Sir Chris Whitty has had to say. He's been giving evidence at the inquiry. Earlier, he admitted that when the decision was taken to implement the first lockdown, he says it was too late.
My view is, with the benefit of hindsight, we went a bit too late on the first wave, and I've been very clear about that for some time.
A bit too late. Oh, yeah, I mean, you know, we already know, don't we, from the official figures, that actually transmission rates at the time were already going down. Why? Because people are quite sensible, and they'd seen that COVID rates were going up, and so what did they do? They limited their contact with other people, because it's almost like we know what we're doing.
And, you know, I think this is one of the things, and the inquiry, the Hugo Keith, who's a KC for the inquiry, is very keen on this idea that, you know, if we could do something, then we should have just done it. And, you know, let's try it out in case it works. And he actually referred to that today as the precautionary principle. And Chris Whitty, to be fair to Chris Whitty, picked him up on this. And he said, that isn't the precautionary principle. You know, what the precautionary principle is we shouldn't do an intervention unless we are absolutely sure the benefits outweigh the harms. And we have searched really hard for the harms. And that didn't happen. And to hear the inquiry pick up this very dangerous fallacy that was really evident throughout the pandemic and a lot of the government's response, to hear that adopted and turbocharged by the inquiry KC is just bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, he seems extraordinarily uninformed about any of this stuff. And again, we're MPs and many in the media like myself and people, your amazing group, asked for them, just saying, can we have a cost-benefit analysis? Can you just show that you've even looked at it? We're told yesterday by Sir Patrick Vallance that, you know, well, you know, the Treasury didn't really push hard enough on the economic costs. And again, we were told, oh, you know, you care more about money than you care about people dying. No, I care about all the people who might die, not just people in their 90s. I care about other people who might die as a result of your policies, mate. I mean, that, you know, that is what we never saw. Let's have a listen and a watch of another little slightly longer clip. This is Professor Sir Chris Whitty. By the way, everyone's got a nice little bauble after this. Everyone's a sir or a dame, aren't they now? That was the deal. Anyway, he was asked about whether there was an overreaction in the government's response to the pandemic. Here's what he had to say.
I've rejected, and I will continue to reject, your characterisation of this as overreaction, because that implies that I thought in a sense the action should not happen. What I thought should happen is that people should be aware.
I mean, Molly Kingsley, I mean, this is just dancing on the head of a pin stuff. But I mean, he only has to look at what happened in Sweden, which didn't lock down. He only has to look at pretty much every other country in Europe that didn't, for instance, close their schools for the best part of a year overall. I mean, this is what I find extraordinary. It's like, how can he not think it was an overreaction, looking at the facts and the data?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 points here. There's, first of all, this very interrogational style of questioning from the KC. So I was listening to this clip earlier and I was quite shocked, actually, because, you know, Whitty was on the back foot here. He was being accused of effectively postponing or delaying this very evidently necessary lockdown. And actually, Whitty came across as more of a, you know, slightly sane voice. He was trying to urge, and we saw this yesterday in Valance's testimony, he was trying to, you know, urge that the other societal and economic, but also societal costs be taken into account. And this is somehow seen as a morally culpable position by the inquiry for him to have taken. I think the idea that, you know, Whitty couldn't stand by his convictions, and, you know, he's almost apologetic there, isn't he? You know, of course it had to be done. It had to be done. Yeah. As you said, Julia, why? Why did it have to be done? Where is that data? And in fact, why is the countervailing data in the form of Sweden not being considered?
They literally don't mention the word. They literally don't mention it. But again, they do like the tittle tattle about, you know, about who, you know, who doesn't like who. Let's have another little clip. This is Whitty being asked about Dominic Cummings, then, of course, the Prime Minister's chief aide there, his evidence in which he had said that number 10 officials attended SAGE meetings. Let's have a watch on that.
When Mr. Cummings himself, when it was known that Mr. Cummings himself sometimes came to SAGE, this caused quite a row, actually. I wasn't the person who made the decision to make that possible, but I thought it was perfectly sensible that one of the most senior advisors to the Prime Minister, if she or he wished to, could listen in on SAGE. Struck me as a sensible thing to do.
I can't even understand why for a moment, Molly, that would be controversial. You'd want to have people listening. The trouble is, Dominic Cummings decided he was the guru on all of this stuff, and only he understood what needed to be done to save people. Isn't one of your overriding concerns about this is just how this was an awful lot of male. I don't like doing this a little bit. This does seem to me again and again. It's an awful lot of male egos, a lot of middle-aged concerned men. At a time when we thought, this affected men a lot more worse than it did women. That basically sort of just basically on their pedestals thinking, I'm saving the world.
I think there are some really serious questions to be asked here about governance and ethics, lack of governance, lack of ethics, why so many people took it upon themselves to think it was acceptable to break out of formal cabinet structures, how that happened, how there was such a lack of transparency, how business was conducted by WhatsApp, how really quite fundamental principles of certainly of ethics, of governance, I would say also of basic dignity and humanity at some point were just disregarded and thrown out of the window, and how no one challenged that. And why, these are the kinds of questions that I think should be asked by the COVID inquiry. Who took it upon themselves to set up these WhatsApp groups? Why did people think that was okay? Why was that not challenged?
Well, you've written about this in your new book, The Accountability Deficit. You've written with others from your Us For Them group, looking at just this sort of, looking at huge amounts of data. If any politician spent as much time looking at the actual information data, we'd be governed so much better, as you do, Molly. But actually looking into, again, accountability. People need to, when they make decisions, they need to be able to show us why they've made their decisions, on what basis, and they need to be able to say when they've got it right and got it wrong, and we should be able to do so too. And it's really important. I hope you'll come back on another day and talk to us in more detail about the book.
I'd love to, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been really kind. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Just been out in hot off the press in the last couple of hours. Otherwise, I'd had a copy of it already. Thank you very much, Molly Kingsley from Us For Them. Always appreciate that.